Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I am so happy and grateful to be here with you today on Facebook. My name is Rebecca Sofer. I am the co-founder of Modern Loss, which offers candid conversation on grief and community and the long arc of it all and resilience. And I am so lucky to host this monthly series with 1-800-Flowers, Light After Loss. This is our monthly series on Facebook, during which I am in conversation with a different expert in a different theme. Every single month, we have really compelling conversations. We take on a different topic, some of which are kind of taboo in casual conversation, and we're trying to make it not taboo, because these are completely universal topics that we all deal with. If we care about anything or anyone in life, we're going to experience feelings of loss. As many of you know, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Now, 1 in 4 women will experience a miscarriage in their lifetime. And every year in the United States alone, nearly 25,000 babies are stillborn. And more than 20,000 infants die in this country as well each year, which means the chances are great that you probably know somebody who's experienced one or more of these, or, both, or maybe you're that person, or maybe all of the above. And for that reason, we kind of want to take on this topic. We want to demystify some of this conversation because even though these losses are particularly excruciating and complicated, they are still known as kind of a silent sorrow, which is a bit more stigmatized than other types of grief. And we want to talk about that because we don't think it should be. So many people experience it, and we're not doing them any favors by making them feel isolated. So today, I'm extremely grateful to be in conversation with Andrea Sirtash. I'm an incredible admirer of hers. I'm so grateful she's here today. She's a relationship expert, and she's also founder of Pregnantish, which is the first media site exclusively dedicated to helping people navigate infertility and modern family building. And she's also host of the Pregnantish podcast. She's very busy and she really knows this space. And, like Modern Loss, which I co-founded in the wake of my mom's death and then my dad's death, because I felt like there was a white space that really existed in the conversation of loss that was more kind of warm and communal and open and not shying away from stigma or levity at times or hope. Andrea started Pregnantish from her own personal experience. So Andrea, first of all, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really grateful you made the time for us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm especially Rebecca and we go way back, and I haven't seen you in person in a long time, and I'm just happy to join you. This is such an important conversation, and I'm so grateful that you're leading it.
Andrea, you've committed a lot of your time to breaking the taboo of infertility and elevating the conversation about what it actually takes to start a family for millions of people. It's not just like, hey, let's get together and have a baby. That's not the way it goes for a lot of people out there. Can you just tell me a little bit about your personal story? Why did you start Pregnantish in the first place?
Well, you're absolutely right. So I thought the narrative first comes love, then comes marriage, then a baby carriage was wildly outdated for 1,000 reasons. People today are skipping steps and missing steps, and obviously, it doesn't always happen in a linear fashion for so many of us. My background is media. I'm a longtime author of relationship books, and I felt through my own infertility experience, struggling to conceive for years, that this was a big space missing, that I was covering all these chapters of modern day relationships. I was on TV, I hosted TV shows. I was out there in the media talking about marriage and babies and in-laws and parenting. But what happens when sex doesn't make baby, or when you have grief over baby? That was something I saw as a major, I've been tracking relationship trends. I saw it as the most underreported trend of our time in terms of relationship chapters. I personally knew that every time I told someone my story, that I was struggling They had a friend, they were going through it. They knew it just felt like a silent epidemic. And so I started Pregnantish because I was pitching, I'm on the morning shows and I'm doing all these things. And I would pitch producers, we have to tell the story of this as a relationship chapter. How do you keep sex sexy when you're trying to conceive and it's not working? How do you recover from a devastation like a miscarriage and keep your relationship intact? How do you keep your relationship to your body even like during these challenges? And a lot of times I was met with, well, that's kind of depressing, or, and I know, Rebecca, you can relate to this. I just knew there was an audience for this. I've been a content creator my whole career. I was like, there is no way that, this is not needed if I need it. So in year 5 or 6 of struggling, I launched the first non-medical platform dedicated to infertility and modern family building, Pregnantish. It quickly became popular because there was nothing like us. And now it's evolved into something really beautiful. But, I'm really glad to be here, especially for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, because we run a whole month of content on this. So many in our community have touch points to this that are unexpected. Like even people who've never even made embryos consider, the grief over not even being able to create a baby. They feel part of this community. And then, of course, people who have lost children, which is unimaginable. But
it is imaginable. It's imaginable to you because you yourself have experienced this. I mean, you understand what it's like to be in this community, right?
I do. So like the very short version, whenever someone says, what's your story? I'm like, how long do you have? But the very short version is I went through about 18 fertility treatments over almost 8 years before I met my baby, who was delivered by my angel of a first cousin, Alana, who was my gestational surrogate. In year 5 or 6, when I launched Pregnantish, a doctor finally said, you have genetically healthy embryos, do not put them in your body, because I have endometriosis and fibroid tumors and all these issues. And he said, you have healthy embryos. If you find a carrier, you probably won't miscarry. It's not guaranteed, but you have a good chance. And the minute we didn't use my body, I met my now daughter, who's almost 3 in December, and she was frozen as an embryo for years before we found a match. Surrogacy is its own crazy chapter, but I can say that going through loss and miscarriage during those years were the darkest times of my life, the biggest challenge I've ever faced. So yeah, this pain point runs deep no matter how common it is, because people always say, oh yeah, 1 in 4, it's very common, don't worry. But and I know that's not how grief works.
And also it's really easy to get lost in the, the numbers of it all. I mean, right now it's easy to kind of get like numb to numbers and not really understand what they mean. I mean, we're living in, COVID time still, and there's 700,000 people who have died from coronavirus in the United States. And that's a big number, right? But we're so used to seeing these numbers that sometimes it only takes, it really hits us when we have some sort of like contact, some sort of touchstone, right? Like point of reference, like they had all those flags in Washington, D.C. represented each person who died a couple of weeks ago from COVID. And it was like acres and acres and acres on the mall. And it was so stunning and impactful that you really were like, wow, that's what 700,000 people look like. And so I think same thing when you're like, oh, 1 in 4. So it's so common. And so many people are going to go through it. Yeah, but that means that so many people are going to go through it. And I think that only when you really start talking about the experiences can you really understand from others how excruciating those experiences can be and how nuanced. And also only when you start talking about your own story, can you really feel like you're being acknowledged and seen in it. And, acknowledgement is so important when it comes to healing and post-traumatic growth. I mean, let me ask, how many miscarriages have you had, Andrea?
Well, so technically I've had 2 that I know of, because sometimes, we don't know. But I should say, like, there's an extra nuance when you're going through IVF and you've put your life savings into it and you've done 6 weeks of shots and meds to get to the pregnancy. Not that it's better or worse. I mean, any miscarriage is devastating. but there's another layer of, by the time I had my first pregnancy, I was 2 or 3 years into trying. And I naively thought, well, finally, finally, I feel normal. I got pregnant. But I saw all the embryos put in my body and that didn't stick as losses, definitely.
Yeah.
I think, one thing that I've said, and I know you'll agree, just understanding grief deeply, is that sometimes people say, well, I shouldn't complain. I've only had like one miscarriage, or I've only tried for like 2 years and you tried for 8 years. And it's like, we're not in the grief Olympics. There's no winner. Right. Like heartache is heartache.
We all win the same crappy prize.
We all win the same crap. Right. And heartache can be, listen, it's a defining moment in your life when these things happen. And and I know sometimes breakthroughs happen through them, and sometimes they're just crappy and don't make sense, and that's okay too. So I went through all the range of emotions.
Can you tell me why you think we do such a poor job of talking about pregnancy related and infancy loss in our culture? I think the most obvious is we call it like the unimaginable, but we do imagine it. And that's why we don't want to talk about it. So it's not unimaginable. We're imagining it.
Yeah, but we don't, I don't know about you, but when I get close to thinking about it, I distract myself with another thought because it's so painful. It's so unfair. I think we don't, a lot of these things that used to be more taboo, social media has been a great game changer. I mean, obviously we're doing this on Facebook, which is great.
Okay.
This is a place where even hashtags are a place where you find community and connection in a way that didn't exist 50 years ago. I mean, I will tell you that I was speaking to someone who worked in the infertility world for years and said, we used to have to send a letter with a fake letterhead because nobody wanted to admit that they were infertile or that they had this kind of loss. So not only was it not talked about, it was buried and it was not to be talked about, which is another level of dysfunction.
So there are actually a lot of people out there who are holding on to stories that they probably haven't even shared yet.
Absolutely. And, we have to look, we could get biblical with this. We have to look at even culturally around the world. For many people, baby making is, it's obviously a central part of life, and people sometimes see a woman's value. They shouldn't, but, and it affects men too, I should say. Not all miscarriages, sometimes 50% of infertility cases are male factors. So it's not always about the woman, but women are seen when they can't procreate in a different light throughout history. And so that shame runs deep. It's not even conscious, I think, for so many of us. Just to feel like my body's not doing the normal thing, and that, and we don't know. I always say you never know about the person you envy. You never know what they're really going through behind the scenes, of course. And so you might see a happy picture, perfect family, have no idea how that family picture got created, but we think we're the only ones sometimes when we're struggling with this kind of loss. And that's why these conversations are so important. But I think that's one reason it's left in the dark for too many people.
And what can we do to make somebody who has experienced a pregnancy or infant loss feel seen, feel acknowledged, feel like they have an invitation to talk about their losses without hurling platitudes at them?
Yes. Well, that's it.
Can we agree that you can always have another baby? Never, ever, ever makes anybody feel better automatically in the moment.
There are 3 words when it comes to pregnancy loss and grief in general that we ban on pregnant. We don't like the word just, we don't like the word should, and we don't like the words at least, because that minimizes experiences. At least you got pregnant. You should just adopt.
Right.
All of these things. Have you tried? Have you thought? Think positively. Those things kill me because, people in war-torn countries get and stay pregnant every day and deliver healthy babies all the time, and they're very stressed. So it's not about stress. And I think we put so much pressure on what we should have done differently. But yeah, advice is a killer when you're grieving. Advice is not helpful. The best thing, we posted this day one on Pregnant on our Twitter account. We posted the best thing to say to someone struggling with infertility is ... to listen. But I would add, if you're going to say something, asking someone, how can I be helpful, is a good first step. Or just offering, I'm sorry, that must be hard, is a great thing to say if you want to say something.
Yeah. And I often find, like, especially for infant related loss or even, or miscarriage, stillbirth, asking people details if they want to share, asking them what was their name, like because they were very much in existence to the parents. They were very much in their minds and their hearts, no matter how far along the loss took place.
That's right.
And a lot of times they had a lot of hopes and dreams. No, I'm sure nearly all the time, they had a lot of hopes and dreams for that child that will never come to fruition. And, in the modern loss community, I know a lot of people get comfort in feeling seen and acknowledged by the people around them when they say, tell me their name, like what, like kind of what were you hoping? Like, what were you thinking? Like, what were you wishing? I mean, it's hard to live with all of that trapped inside your head and your heart all the time.
I did a ritual where I lit candles for every baby I thought I'd meet through all the years of trying and struggling and losing. And I bawled, and it was very cathartic. But it allowed me, like you're saying, to name my feeling, to acknowledge this being that I never got to meet, but still loved. I wrote an essay, of course, for Modern Love called Unmet Love. I've been a love and relationship expert for a while. I asserted in that essay that I think it's a myth you can't love someone you've never met. When you go through this kind of loss, you absolutely know that you love that person that you didn't meet fully. And you didn't need to have a conversation with that person, that baby, to feel deeply in love and connected. And I think that's the other problem with people who haven't necessarily been through this experience or been through devastating grief or loss. They don't understand, especially if fertility was kind of easy for them. They think you can just try again because, you're young. That's a trigger for people in our community. You're young is bad because it just minimizes, like, give me a minute. Let me just grieve this and acknowledge this loss. And we still hear today, and I still feel today, like every September, October, and we're in October now, I think, oh my goodness, I would have had an 8-year-old now. Like, I have a over 2.5-year-old, but I would have had an 8-year-old if I didn't miscarry that first girl. So it doesn't go away when you lose these babies you don't know, but you love.
Yeah. Well, you stole the question right out from under me, because that really was a beautiful essay that you wrote for Modern Loss. And it really stayed with me because I do think it's silly how people can't automatically understand that you have love for an idea, for, a plan, a wish. I mean, I think a lot of us grow up imagining like the person that we might end up with, and we love the idea of them, and we're already in love with them, even though they may or may not exist. So how is it not possible that you absolutely love this person who you either get to meet briefly or for a short period of time, or never actually get to meet outside of your body? So how do you think that people can create community around this type of grief? Because obviously, like, grief is grief, right? But of course, it always helps to know some people who can relate to the specific type of losses that you've had, because it just helps you exhale a little more in the conversation.
Well, like I said before, if you're into social media, I think it is a really great space for people in this loss community. Hashtags that are very popular through our community: miscarriage awareness, pregnancy loss awareness, infant loss awareness. These hashtags gather people together to mourn and share and grieve and also access information. Like there's a lot of question marks when these things happen where you don't understand why you miscarried, for instance, or why your baby died. Like you're left in a complete, not only shock, but confusion. So just to access resources and support and community as social media is great, but I know it's not for everyone. And so I used to tell, and I forgot, I should know by now because I've given this advice before, what game show it is where they say, call your five, pyramid, one of those.
Oh, it's Millionaire. Who wants
Millionaire. So right. You have your five so that's, if you're not into social media, just know your five people who can be on that call. And it doesn't have to be obvious people. It could be, I was speaking with someone recently who met a rabbi at a funeral and was like, I really connected with him. And I said, he should be one of your five, see what's available, So it's not always going to come in an obvious form, like your best friend or your whoever. But once you know your five trusted people, you don't need everyone else to understand your pain because you won't feel as alone.
Exactly. And you'll feel, like we said, seen and acknowledged. If you don't have that feeling of acknowledgement from some aspect of your life, it's incredibly hard to move through this.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's excellent advice. And I would say that actually a lot of times, some of the people that are going to be there for you aren't the ones you assume will be there. A lot of them are just coming out of the woodwork. The rabbi,
and people disappoint you. People disappoint you who you thought would be there, who you counted on prior to your terrible loss. And then they kind of let you down. But that happens too in these experiences.
It does. Loss affects friendships. It affects relationships and social dynamics. And also on the flip side, the opportunity for connection with other people who are not only empathic, but also maybe have gone through something similar and come out of the woodwork for you is really endless because there are a lot of people out there to connect with. So thank you so much, Andrea Sirtash, for chatting with me today about pregnancy loss and infant loss. Again, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and we really wanted to start kind of examining this topic here on Light After Loss. And I'm just really grateful that Andrea Sirtash from Pregnantish is here. She has incredible resources over on her website. And of course, feel free to make any comments or submit any questions in the comments section, and we will get to them as soon as possible. We'll get back to you. So thank you so much, Andrea, for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thanks again to everybody who's watching this. This is the Light After Loss series for 1-800-Flowers. I'm Rebecca Sofer from Modern Loss, and I will see you next month.